She was supposed to be untouchable, the most powerful woman in the city, sitting atop a glass tower that kissed the clouds. But when her body began failing, all the money in the world couldn't save her. Then a single dad with calloused hands and military dog tags walked into her sterile world, and everything changed. Before we dive into this incredible story of healing, sacrifice, and unexpected love, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that heroes come in the most unexpected forms. Now, let me tell you what really happened. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victoria Sterling's corner office on the 42nd floor. October in Chicago always felt like the city was crying, but today it seemed personal. She pressed her palm against the cool glass and watched the blur of headlights below, each one carrying someone home to warmth, to family, to a life that wasn't measured in quarterly reports and board meetings. Victoria had built Sterling Dynamics from nothing. 23 years old when she started, 38 now, and worth more than most small countries. She had everything: power, influence, respect, everything except time. The diagnosis had come 6 months ago, a rare blood disorder, so aggressive that her own immune system was destroying her from the inside out. The best doctors in the world had tried everything: experimental treatments, cutting-edge therapies, procedures that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Nothing worked. She turned from the window, her reflection ghost-like against the darkening sky. The woman staring back was still beautiful, but hollow. Her once vibrant auburn hair had thinned to wisps. Her green eyes, once sharp enough to cut through any boardroom challenge, now seemed clouded with fatigue. The power suits could no longer hide how the illness was consuming her. Miss Sterling, her assistant Margaret, stood in the doorway holding a tablet. "The medical team is here for your 4 o'clock consultation." Victoria nodded. Another day, another group of specialists with grave expressions and gentle voices, telling her what she already knew. Time was running out. The conference room felt more like a funeral parlor than a place of healing. Dr. Harrison, her lead oncologist, sat across from her with 3 other doctors, their faces wearing the same careful mask of professional compassion. Charts and test results lay scattered across the mahogany table, like evidence of a crime. "Miss Sterling," Dr. Harrison began, his voice measured, "we've exhausted all conventional treatments. The experimental protocol we discussed has been approved, but I need to be honest with you about the risks." Victoria folded her hands in her lap. "I'm listening." "It would require a bone marrow transplant, but finding a compatible donor has been—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Challenging. Your blood type is rare, and with your specific genetic markers, the pool of potential donors is extremely limited." Dr. Chen, the hematologist, leaned forward. "We've searched the national registry, reached out to international databases. So far, no matches." Victoria felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear. Exactly. She had lived with fear for months now. This was something else. Finality. "How long?" she asked quietly. The doctors exchanged glances. Dr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Without a donor, perhaps 3 weeks, maybe 4. The room fell silent, except for the distant hum of the city below. Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled only slightly. "Thank you for your honesty. Margaret will see you out." After they left, Victoria remained alone in the conference room, staring at the wall of awards and accolades that marked her rise to the top. All of it felt meaningless now. She had conquered corporate America, but she couldn't conquer her own failing body. That evening, she drove herself home to the penthouse. No driver, no security detail, just her in the silence of a life lived in isolation. The apartment was a masterpiece of modern design, all clean lines and expensive art. Cold, beautiful, empty. She poured herself a glass of wine. She wouldn't finish and stood on the balcony, looking out over the city she had helped shape. Somewhere down there, among the 8 million people, was her match. Someone whose blood could save her life. But they might as well have been on another planet. Her phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. the medical team has scheduled additional donor drives at local hospitals and community centers. They're hopeful. Victoria almost laughed. Hopeful. She had built an empire on hope, on the belief that anything could be achieved with enough determination and resources. But some things couldn't be bought, couldn't be negotiated, couldn't be conquered. She went to bed that night, thinking about her parents, dead for over a decade now. Her father, a blue-collar mechanic who had worked 2 jobs to put her through school. Her mother, a nurse who had taught her that strength came not from what you could take, but from what you could give. They would have known what to do. They would have found a way to fight. But Victoria had been fighting alone for so long. She had forgotten how to ask for help. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Though she didn't know it yet, Margaret knocked on her office door with a strange expression, part excitement, part uncertainty. "Miss Sterling, there's been a development with the donor search." Victoria looked up from her laptop. "Good news, I hope." "There's a community health fair happening this weekend at the Veterans Center downtown. Dr. Harrison's team wants to set up a testing station there. They think there might be a better chance of finding a match among service members and veterans." Victoria frowned. "Why?" Margaret sat down, consulting her notes. Something about blood type distributions in military populations. Plus, veterans are more likely to be registered organ donors. "It's a long shot, but it's a shot," Victoria finished. She was quiet for a long moment. "Set it up." The Chicago Veterans Center occupied an old brick building that had once been a factory. Now it housed job training programs, counseling services, and community events for men and women who had served their country. On Saturday morning, it buzzed with activity as families arrived for the health fair. Victoria stood in the parking lot, feeling out of place in her designer clothes, among the crowd of people in jeans and military surplus jackets. She had never been to anything like this. Her world was one of boardrooms and country clubs, not community centers and potluck dinners. Inside, the building smelled like coffee and industrial disinfectant. Tables were set up throughout the main hall, offering everything from blood pressure checks to information about veteran benefits. In one corner, Dr. Harrison's team had established their donor testing station, a simple setup with folding chairs and medical equipment that looked almost makeshift compared to the high-tech facilities Victoria was used to. She watched from across the room as people approached the station, mostly men, ranging from young soldiers barely out of their teens to gray-haired veterans of conflicts she could barely remember. Each one rolled up their sleeve without hesitation, offering their blood in hopes of saving a stranger. It humbled her in a way she hadn't expected. That's when she saw him. He was standing at the coffee table, helping a little girl reach the sugar packets, while her mother balanced a baby on her hip. Tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair and the kind of weathered hands that spoke of real work. He wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans. Nothing remarkable, but there was something about him that made Victoria pause. He knelt down to the little girl's level, showing her how to tear open the sugar packet without spilling it everywhere. When she giggled at something he said, his whole face transformed. Not handsome in the polished way of the men in her social circle, but real, solid, present. "That's Marcus Reynolds," Margaret said, appearing beside her. "Single father, served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He's here with his daughter Emma." Victoria watched as Marcus straightened up, ruffling the little girl's hair before guiding her back to her mother. Something in his movements was careful, protective. The way he scanned the room, positioned himself between his daughter and the crowd. Old habits from dangerous places. "He's been coming to these community events for years," Margaret continued. "Volunteers with the job placement program. Lost his wife in a car accident when Emma was 2. Victoria felt an unexpected pang at that. Loss was something she understood, though hers had been different, slower, more predictable. She watched as Marcus made his way over to the donor station. He spoke briefly with one of the technicians, signed some paperwork, then rolled up his sleeve. The whole process took maybe 10 minutes. He didn't make a big deal of it, didn't expect any recognition. He just did it because it needed to be done. That was 2 weeks ago. Victoria had gone home that day, thinking about the contrast between her sterile world and the warmth she had witnessed at the Veterans Center. She had thought about Marcus Reynolds more than she cared to admit. Something about his quiet strength had stayed with her. Now she sat in Dr. Harrison's office, listening to words that seemed impossible. "We found a match," he was saying. "Not just compatible, but perfect. I've never seen markers align this precisely. It's like finding a genetic twin." Victoria's hands gripped the arms of her chair. "Who?" Dr. Harrison consulted his file. "Marcus Reynolds, veteran, single father. He's already agreed to the procedure." The room seemed to tilt. "He what?" "We contacted him as soon as the results came back, explained the situation, the urgency." He didn't hesitate. Victoria stared at the doctor, trying to process what he was telling her. "Does he know who the recipient is?" "We don't typically share that information." "But," Dr. Harrison paused. "He asked. When we told him it was you, he said it didn't change anything. He was still willing to help." Victoria felt something crack open inside her chest. This man, this stranger who lived in a completely different world, was willing to undergo a painful, risky procedure to save her life, and he had asked for nothing in return. "I need to meet with him," she said quietly. Dr. Harrison frowned. "Miss Sterling, that's not usual protocol." "I don't care about protocol." Her voice carried the authority that had made her one of the most feared negotiators in corporate America. "I need to look him in the eye before I let him do this." The meeting was arranged for the next day at the hospital. Victoria arrived early, pacing the small conference room like a caged animal. She had rehearsed what she would say, how she would thank him, but every word seemed inadequate. When Marcus walked in, she was struck again by his presence. He moved like someone comfortable in his own skin, unhurried but purposeful. He wore khakis and a button-down shirt, clearly his best clothes. His daughter Emma clung to his hand, wide-eyed at the impressive hospital surroundings. "Miss Sterling," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, calloused from years of construction work. "Marcus Reynolds, this is my daughter Emma." Victoria knelt down to Emma's level, just as she had seen Marcus do at the Veterans Center. "Hello, Emma. You have very pretty hair." Emma smiled shyly and whispered something to her father. Marcus chuckled. "She wants to know if you're really a princess. She thinks your building looks like a castle." Despite everything, Victoria laughed. It was the first genuine laugh she'd had in months. "I'm not a princess, sweetheart. Just a lady who's very lucky to meet you and your daddy." When Emma was distracted by the fish tank in the corner, Victoria turned to Marcus. "Why?" she asked simply. He was quiet for a long moment, watching his daughter trace patterns on the glass with her finger. "My wife died because she couldn't get the help she needed fast enough," he said finally. "Wrong place, wrong time, wrong circumstances. But you can get help, and I can give it." He met her eyes. "Seems like a pretty easy choice." Victoria felt tears threatening, something that rarely happened anymore. "The procedure is risky. There could be complications." Marcus shrugged. "Life's risky. Getting up in the morning is risky. But Emma needs to grow up in a world where people help each other when they can." "I could give you anything," Victoria said. "Money, a job, anything you need." "I don't need anything from you, except to get better," Marcus replied. "Emma's already lost one person she cared about. The world doesn't need to lose another good person if we can prevent it." Victoria stared at him. In her world, every transaction had an angle. Every kindness came with strings attached. But this man was offering her the greatest gift imaginable, asking for nothing in return. "How do you know I'm a good person?" she asked. Marcus smiled, the same expression she had seen when he helped Emma with the sugar packets. "Because bad people don't usually ask that question." The bone marrow transplant was scheduled for the following Monday. Victoria spent the weekend putting her affairs in order, writing letters she hoped would never need to be sent, making decisions about her company that felt both crucial and utterly meaningless. She also found herself thinking about Marcus and Emma, about the life they had built together after tragedy, about the quiet strength that carried them through each day. It was so different from her own existence, so much richer despite having so much less. On Sunday evening, she made a decision that surprised even her. She drove to the address Margaret had provided, a modest duplex in a working-class neighborhood she had never visited. The lawn was neat, the porch light warm and welcoming. Through the window, she could see Marcus helping Emma with what looked like homework at the kitchen table. She almost lost her nerve. What was she doing here? What could she possibly say? But then Emma looked up and saw her through the window. The little girl's face broke into a smile, and she tugged on her father's shirt, pointing outside. Marcus looked up, surprise flickering across his face, before he smiled too. He opened the door before Victoria could knock. "Miss Sterling, everything okay? I wanted to thank you," she said, then felt how inadequate that sounded. "And I wanted to ask you something." "Come in," he said, stepping aside. Emma made brownies. They're only slightly burnt. The house was small but warm, filled with the kind of comfortable clutter that spoke of a life actually being lived. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator. Books were stacked on every available surface. A guitar leaned against the couch, well used, but cared for. Victoria accepted a brownie and a cup of coffee, sitting at the kitchen table while Emma chattered about her day at school. It occurred to her that she couldn't remember the last time she had sat in someone's kitchen, just talking. "What did you want to ask me?" Marcus said, when Emma went to her room to get ready for bed. Victoria set down her coffee cup. "After the procedure, when I'm recovering, I'd like to get to know you both better, if that's okay." Marcus studied her face. "Why?" "Because you're saving my life, and I don't know anything about you except that you're the kind of person who saves lives." She paused. "And because Emma asked if you were a princess, and I realized no one has ever seen me as anything other than a CEO or a patient. I'd like to try being just Victoria for a while." Marcus was quiet for a long time. "It might be strange," he said finally. "Our worlds are pretty different. Maybe that's exactly what I need." The surgery was scheduled for dawn. Victoria arrived at the hospital as the sun was painting the sky pink and gold. Marcus was already there, checking in at the registration desk, while Emma sat nearby, swinging her legs and clutching a stuffed elephant. When she saw Victoria, Emma ran over and hugged her legs. "Daddy says you're going to be okay," she said solemnly. "I brought Mr. Peanuts to watch over you." She held up the elephant. "He's very good at keeping people safe." Victoria knelt down and accepted the stuffed animal with the seriousness it deserved. "Thank you, Emma. I'll take very good care of him." Marcus walked over, and Victoria was struck by how calm he seemed. She was terrified, had been awake all night with anxiety, but he looked like he was heading to work on any ordinary day. "Ready?" he asked. "Are you?" she countered. He smiled. "I'm ready to help you get your life back." They were taken to separate preparation areas. Victoria lay on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of the hospital waking up around her. Nurses came and went, checking her vitals, confirming her identity, preparing her for what was to come. Dr. Harrison appeared at her bedside. "How are you feeling?" "Grateful," she said, surprising herself with the honesty of it, "and scared." "The fear is normal. The gratitude, that's good. It means you understand what a gift this is." Victoria nodded. "Will he be okay, Mr. Reynolds?" "He's in excellent health. The procedure is more routine for the donor than the recipient. He should be back on his feet in a day or two." "And me?" Dr. Harrison's expression grew more serious. "The next few weeks will be critical. Your body has to accept his bone marrow, start producing healthy cells. There will be good days and bad days. But if it works, if your body accepts the transplant, you could have years ahead of you, decades." They wheeled her into the operating room an hour later. The last thing she saw before the anesthesia took hold was Marcus being wheeled into the adjacent room. He caught her eye through the window and gave her a thumbs up, as if he was sending her off on a vacation instead of a life-saving medical procedure. Victoria woke up in the intensive care unit, surrounded by machines and monitors. Everything hurt, but she was alive. More than alive. She was hopeful for the first time in months. Margaret was sitting beside her bed, along with Dr. Harrison, and a woman Victoria didn't recognize. "How do you feel?" Dr. Harrison asked. "Like I was hit by a truck," Victoria whispered, her throat raw from the breathing tube. "But like a truck full of hope." Dr. Harrison smiled. "The procedure went perfectly. Mr. Reynolds is doing well too. He's been asking about you." Victoria tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Can I see him?" "Tomorrow, maybe. Right now, you both need rest." The woman Victoria didn't recognize stepped forward. "Miss Sterling, I'm Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister. He asked me to give you this." She handed Victoria a folded piece of paper. Inside, in Emma's careful 6-year-old handwriting, was a drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. At the bottom, in Marcus's steadier script, were the words, "Emma wanted you to know that she and Mr. Peanuts are rooting for you. Get well soon." Marcus. Victoria held the drawing against her chest and cried for the first time since her diagnosis. The recovery was harder than anyone had anticipated. Victoria's body fought the new bone marrow for the first week, and there were moments when the doctors worried the transplant might fail. She drifted in and out of consciousness, battling infections and complications that left her weaker than she had ever been. But Marcus's bone marrow was strong, and eventually it began to win. Her blood counts slowly improved. The healthy cells began to multiply. Hope transformed from a fragile wish into a growing certainty. On her 10th day in the hospital, Victoria was finally strong enough to walk down the hall to Marcus's room. He had been discharged days ago but kept coming back to check on her progress, usually with Emma in tow. She found him sitting by the window, reading a paperback thriller and looking completely out of place among the medical equipment. When he saw her in the doorway, his face lit up. "Look who's vertical," he said, standing up. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm borrowing someone else's blood," she said, then immediately felt awkward about the joke. But Marcus laughed. "Well, I've got good blood. Military tested and approved." Victoria sat down carefully in the chair across from him. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me. Just get better." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city wake up below them. Victoria realized she had never noticed how beautiful the view was from this angle, how the morning light caught the glass and steel and turned it into something magical. "Emma's been asking when you're coming over for dinner," Marcus said eventually. Victoria looked at him in surprise. "She has? Every day. She's convinced you need to try her famous mac and cheese. It comes from a box, but she adds extra cheese and cuts up hot dogs in it." Victoria felt something warm spread through her chest, and she realized it wasn't just gratitude. "I'd love that. When I'm strong enough. No rush. We'll be there when you're ready." 3 weeks later, Victoria walked up the steps to Marcus's duplex, carrying a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers. Emma had specifically requested yellow ones because they were happy colors. Emma met her at the door, practically bouncing with excitement. "Victoria, Daddy made real mac and cheese, not the box kind, and I helped." The house smelled like garlic and cheese, and something indefinably homey. Marcus appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel and looking slightly frazzled. "Fair warning, we may have gone a little overboard," he said. Emma insisted on a full 5-course meal. "We've got salad, bread, the famous mac and cheese, and chocolate chip cookies for dessert." Victoria laughed. "Sounds perfect to me." Dinner was chaotic and wonderful. Emma kept up a steady stream of chatter about school, her friends, and the book she was reading, about a girl who could talk to animals. Marcus told stories about his construction crew, his voice animated as he described the challenges of renovating old buildings. Victoria found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. No business talk, no networking, no agenda beyond enjoying the moment. She helped Emma clear the table and stood at the sink washing dishes while Marcus dried them. "This is nice," she said quietly. Marcus glanced at her. "What's nice?" "This normal. I haven't felt normal in a very long time." "Well, you're welcome to normal anytime you want. Emma's already planning your next visit." After Emma went to bed, they sat on the front porch with cups of coffee, watching the neighborhood settle into evening quiet. Victoria felt peaceful in a way that had nothing to do with her improving health and everything to do with the man sitting beside her. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always. Do you ever regret it? Giving up part of yourself for someone you didn't even know?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. "You know what I regret?" he said finally. "I regret that it took you almost dying for us to meet." Victoria looked at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "I've been thinking about this a lot," he continued, "about how different our lives are, about whether this is just gratitude you're feeling, or something more. But then I watch you with Emma, see how you light up when she tells you about her day, and I think maybe it doesn't matter how we got here. Maybe what matters is that we're here now." Victoria set down her coffee cup with hands that trembled slightly. "Marcus, I know it's complicated," he said quickly. "I know we're from different worlds, but these past few weeks, getting to know you, not the CEO or the patient, just Victoria, I've seen someone I'd like to keep knowing." Victoria felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the ones she'd cried in the hospital. These were tears of possibility, of hope for a future she had never imagined. "I've never had a normal relationship," she said. "I don't know how to do this without boardrooms and contracts and negotiations." Marcus smiled. "Lucky for you, I'm an excellent teacher." 6 months later, Victoria stood in the boardroom of Sterling Dynamics, addressing her senior staff. She looked healthy, vibrant, alive in a way that had nothing to do with just surviving her illness. "I'm announcing some changes to the company structure," she said, "effective immediately. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. I'll remain as chairman of the board, but I'm promoting Jennifer Walsh to CEO." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Jennifer, Victoria's longtime second-in-command, looked stunned. "This doesn't mean I'm abandoning the company," Victoria continued. "It means I'm choosing to live a life that includes more than just work. Some of you might not understand that choice, but I hope someday you will." After the meeting, Victoria cleaned out her office, packing away 15 years of awards and accolades. Margaret helped her box up personal items, both women working in the comfortable silence of people who had shared more than just a professional relationship. "Are you sure about this?" Margaret asked, wrapping a crystal paperweight in tissue paper. Victoria looked out the window at the city below, the same view that had once represented everything she had built and achieved. Now it just looked like a place where people lived and worked and loved and grieved, no more or less important than any other place. "I'm sure," she said, "for the first time in my life. I'm absolutely sure." That evening, she drove to Marcus's house, using the key he had given her the month before. She let herself in quietly, listening to the sounds of their evening routine. Emma practicing piano in the living room, Marcus cooking dinner in the kitchen. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching him move around with the easy efficiency of someone who had learned to manage a household on his own. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "How'd it go?" "I'm officially a woman of leisure," she said, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "Jennifer thinks I've lost my mind. Have you?" Victoria considered this seriously. "Maybe, but it's the best kind of crazy." Emma appeared in the doorway, abandoning her piano practice in favor of hugging Victoria around the waist. "Did you quit your job?" "Sort of," Victoria said. "I decided I wanted to spend more time with you and your dad." Emma's face lit up. "Does that mean you can come to my school play next week?" Victoria looked at Marcus, who was grinning. "I wouldn't miss it." Later that night, after Emma was asleep, and they were sitting on the couch with their legs tangled together. Marcus took Victoria's hand. "I have something to tell you," he said, and Victoria's heart skipped despite the seriousness in his voice. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple solitaire diamond ring. "I know we've only been together 6 months. I know it's fast, but I also know that life is short and precious, and sometimes you get a second chance at happiness when you least expect it." Victoria stared at the ring, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not asking you to choose between your old life and this one," Marcus continued. "I'm asking you to build a new one with us, with me and Emma, and whatever comes next." Victoria looked into his eyes, seeing her future reflected there. Not the life she had planned, not the empire she had built, but something better, something real. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, and Victoria marveled at how perfectly it fit, how right it felt to wear something that represented love instead of achievement. They were married 6 months later, in a small ceremony at the Veterans Center, where they had first met. Emma was the maid of honor, walking down the aisle in a yellow dress that matched her bouquet. Victoria's wedding dress was simple, elegant, nothing like the elaborate gown she had once imagined wearing in some grand cathedral. Instead of a traditional reception, they hosted a potluck dinner in the community center's main hall. Veterans and their families mingled with Victoria's few close friends and her small family. The cake was homemade, the music came from a borrowed sound system, and the decorations were created by Emma and her art class. It was perfect. During their first dance, Victoria rested her head against Marcus's shoulder and marveled at the path that had brought them together. "No regrets?" he murmured against her hair. "Only one," she said, pulling back to look at him. His expression grew concerned. "What?" Victoria smiled. "I regret that we waited so long to have this conversation." Marcus laughed, spinning her around as the music swelled. "Well, we've got the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." As they danced, surrounded by the people who had become their chosen family, Victoria thought about the woman she had been a year ago. Powerful, successful, but ultimately alone. She had thought she needed to save herself, to fight her battles single-handedly. Instead, she had learned that sometimes salvation came in the most unexpected forms. Sometimes it came from a stranger, willing to share his blood, his life, his love, with someone he barely knew. Sometimes it came from a little girl who saw possibilities instead of differences, who asked if you were a princess and didn't care about the answer. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it came from finding out that the person who saved your life was also the person you wanted to spend the rest of that life with. The music slowed, and Marcus pulled her closer. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria smiled up at him. "I'm thinking about how sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. How losing everything helped me find what I really needed." "And what's that?" "This," she said simply. "You, Emma. A reason to wake up every morning that has nothing to do with profit margins or board meetings." Marcus kissed her forehead gently. "Well then, Mrs. Reynolds, let's make sure you have plenty of reasons to keep waking up." As the song ended, and their guests applauded, Victoria realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking about what came next. She wasn't planning, or strategizing, or worrying about the future. She was simply present, in love, and alive. And that was more than enough. Years later, when Emma was older and asked about how her dad and stepmother had met, Victoria would tell her about blood tests and bone marrow transplants and the strange alchemy that had transformed a medical procedure into a love story. But she would also tell her about the real magic, that sometimes, when you think your story is ending, it's actually just beginning. And sometimes the person who saves your life is also the person who teaches you how to live it. Emma would nod solemnly and ask if that made her dad a hero, and Victoria would smile and say that yes, he was a hero, but not for the reasons people might think. He was a hero because he had shown her that love wasn't something you earned or achieved or conquered. It was something you gave freely, without expecting anything in return. And in giving it, you received more than you ever thought possible. That was the real cure, Victoria realized. Not the bone marrow that had saved her body, but the love that had healed her soul. And unlike her illness, this cure would last a lifetime. If this story of unexpected love and second chances touched your heart, we'd love to know where in the world you're watching from. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of love to heal, hit that subscribe button. We'll be here with more stories that remind us that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives are the ones we never saw coming.